It doesn't matter if you're playing together in person or connecting remotely. If you use props, it'll help build immersion in your game, and it'll bring your tabletop role-playing game to the next level. And I'm not really even talking about miniatures or terrain that you're building or purchasing, although that can be pretty great too. But today, I'm going to give you some tips on props that you can use both in person and online, and what I've done in my home game. Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where we love geeky wisdom. If you're new to the channel, my name is Brian, and we release new videos weekly, so please consider subscribing and turning on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of the content. I really like in-person, at the table, hands-on props and accessories. I'm going to use an example of something I did a couple of years back. I hesitate because this is going to sound a little overboard, but back in 2019, I wanted to run a D&D game for my birthday, and I wanted to go all out, so I planned a dinner party. We were going to have food and drink, and I was going to have gifts for the guests. Running the game was actually a birthday present to myself, so keep in mind, this will be over the top. For the game itself, I wanted to run a location-based one-shot adventure with the potential of it turning into a campaign. This was in 2019, so we ended up not being able to do that. But I knew that I'd have a couple of brand new players, and the rest were of varying levels of experience. And in grand D&D fashion, I wanted to have the players meet at an inn. But instead of just meeting at an inn and starting there, I wanted the whole adventure to be held in and around that inn. So I developed Providence Manor, a boarding house that was previously a family estate. Stick with me, I didn't build a whole boarding house. The lady of the estate was recently widowed, but she still lived in the manor itself, and she converted the rest of the home into a boarding house for those that were visiting the area. She has an old family friend named Atticus who assists her around the place. He's a middle-aged, bright-eyed gnome who's a retired adventurer who takes care of the place and also serves as the chef. I provided all of this information to the players ahead of time, so they knew that their characters would be guests at Providence Manor when the game started. So let me get into the props a little bit. I found some cheap, old-timey looking keys on Amazon, and I set one aside for each guest. And these would be their room keys, and it added the feel of immersion to the game. I also had the table set before everyone arrived, and when I mean set, I mean there was a place setting for everyone. And the place settings included a wooden plate, some silverware, some wooden goblets and mugs. All of these I found on Amazon. And I also included pencils and a notepad and a set of cheap dice in a small cloth bag. And of course, I put the room key at their seat. It was an awesome feeling seeing everyone's faces when they showed up. Not even just during the game, just when they showed up. They had no clue what they were getting into, and they saw this table setting. Again, this was a birthday present to myself, so if you think of this as over the top, you're right, like I mentioned before. Don't feel like you have to do any of this or all of it, but I'm using it as an example of best case scenario to use physical props. I kicked off everything with a brief DM instruction to the story as usual, and then I set the stage for the players to meet each other in the main dining hall. I should also mention that Atticus, the gnome, he was an inventor, and he crafted this amazing contraption to smoke and cook food outside. And he prided himself on tangy yet sweet sauces. Yeah, I made my own homebrew in-game explanation for barbecue. So the players ate barbecue in character at the table, and it was a really good way to break the ice, getting some role-playing going and introduce themselves over a meal. Oh, and I forgot, I started the game with a healing potion cocktail. I found a drink recipe online, and I poured them into some glass potion-shaped bottles that I found at a craft store. But what made these magical was this little pearlescent powder. I'll link it if I find it in the description below. That is completely edible, and you sprinkle a little bit into it, and when you shake up the vial, it sparkles and swirls in a very magical way. It was really cool. And for good measure, I put out some charcuterie boards and some baked goodies for people to snack on later, because Food makes people happy, and I wanted to start off the game on a good note. When I say I did it, I also had my partner Crystal helping with all this, so I'm not taking full credit, but this is just part of the plan. I had to plan all this stuff without her knowing, so when we went to the store, because she was a player, I had to hide things and go back to get them on my own, so she knew about most of the food, she didn't know about all the other things. And speaking of all the other things, I didn't just use food. In the story, there was an NPC character who was missing from the table, and nobody knew why he was missing, and they hadn't met him before. However, during the meal, a delivery arrived for this missing NPC. And I described a wooden crate, just a simple wooden box really, with some jute twine tied around it to keep it secure, and it had a letter that was also addressed to the NPC. It was a long session, so I'm not going to explain the whole story now. Comment below if you actually want to hear about it. Maybe I can do a video about it if you would like to hear it. But at some point, the PCs wanted to take a look at the crate. I mean, when the guy didn't show up, it's just hard for PCs not to go and look in things, right? So, of course, I had that actual crate. Everyone's eyes went huge when I said, hang on for a sec, and I left the room to go get the crate. And they actually got to investigate what was inside. And when they did, they found items. I picked up some super cheap stuff from a thrift store, costume jewelry, an old candlestick holder, and I included a list in the letter of what those things did. Most of them, if not all of them, were magic items. You see, this missing NPC was a Jägerinnen. And in my homebrew world, the Jägerinnen are a group of monster hunters. Think Van Helsing or the Belmonts in Castlevania. So the players had to decide how to divvy up the stuff, just like their characters would in the game. And one of these items was tied specifically to a plot hook in the story. They figured it out on their own. They didn't even have to get pushed or railroaded in any direction. They just it was just amazing how they pieced all of it together based on what they had. Again, you totally do not have to do all the things I did, but if you work out one or two small things, it can be so much fun for both you and the players. It doesn't even have to cost you anything. You can craft this stuff yourself. You could even just brew a pot of tea and put out some cookies, and then the next time your player characters have to go meet with a wizard in a tower and discuss things with him, have them do it over tea. Because, I mean, who doesn't like tea and cookies? These days, we often play online for a variety of reasons. Distance, timing, whatever. And there are some drawbacks to that, especially when you consider all the things I did in my in-person game. However, there are some things that are easier in a digital format. For my Relics of the Ancients livestream campaign, I used several props that were digital to help the players connect. For one, artwork. It's really easy to share artwork when you're doing it during a live stream. And it can be a great addition to the game, but also I used videos to create dream sequences, complete with the visuals and the voiceover, and before you worry about the cost of all this, it was free. I used Canva for the artwork and the stock images, and I used Audacity, another free program, and iMovie, well, free for me because I'm on a Mac, but you could use other free video editing software. I also created a digital puzzle that you might have seen during the campaign that they used to enter into the dungeon. They had to solve the puzzle, and then the door opened and they were able to get in. Shout out to DM Scotty because I used his idea for that and just made it digital instead of physical in person. So, you know, the little signs that go on the table if you're in a casino that explains the game and the rules? I made those because I had the Silver Beard Casino in my campaign and they were visiting there and they got to choose if they wanted to play games. So why not have a sign on the table so that they could read about it? Again, if you want me to do a deep dive into any of this stuff, how I created it, how I used it, just leave a comment below. I would be happy to go into detail if you'd like, but I don't want to cover it in too much detail if you guys already know how to do this stuff. I used Canva for the stock images and the video like I mentioned, and for all the graphic design I needed for the puzzle. If you want to try out Canva for yourself, they've provided me with an affiliate link, and you can use this link to access a free 30-day trial of the pro version of the application. The pro version is what I use because it has an expanded library of stock photos and video and audio. So if you're interested in trying it out, you can use the URL on your screen to access the free trial. I've also included it in the doobly-doo below. Well, thanks for hanging out with me while I shared my geek philosophy about using props in your D&D game. I hope you found some of these ideas useful, but let me know in the comments if you have your own tips. I would love to hear them. I'd like to leave you with a little geek philosophy from the actor, writer, and fellow D&D nerd, Will Wheaton. I've done a lot of geeky things in my life, but I think the geekiest of all was my first effort to build props and cosplay when I was about 12 years old. Cheers.